right, we'll just give it another minute to let some more folks into the room here. Okay. Well, hello and welcome to day 2 of Soil Health Week. My name is Liz Ruppel and I'm a lead organizer over at the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. If you have not heard of us before, we are a statewide nonprofit organization. We bring farmers and eaters together to solve problems in the food system. Many times that looks like working on some policy solutions and changing regulations and rules that promote a just and regenerative local food and farm system. So we are here celebrating Soil Health Week. We are not only honoring soil health, but we are celebrating the resolution that the Illinois Stewardship Alliance Caucus submitted this year that would raise awareness of the importance of our soils by dedicating a week-long celebration to occur the second week of March and a Soil Health Day to occur on the Wednesday of that week as Soil Health Day. So we're in the middle of our legislative session right now, and that resolution is rocking and rolling, but we do have an action alert that you can take some action and help encourage your legislators here in Illinois to pass that or adopt that resolution, hopefully very soon, maybe sometime this week as an extra surprise for Soil Health Week. But if you did want to add your name to that action alert and nudge your legislator, that would be really appreciated. So why are we celebrating soil? Illinois, as you know, has some of the best soil in the world, and everyone is impacted by the health of our soils, from the food we eat to the water that we drink. Our food system, waterways, and economy and the environment are all rooted in the health of our soils. So by celebrating, honoring, and protecting one of those most valuable resources can help ensure that agriculture can continue to be an economic driver for the state for generations to come. So before I introduce Jim Moseley, I did just want to take a moment to thank our Soil Health Caucus, and because this resolution was farmer drafted and farmer led. And the idea stemmed out of that caucus. It's a group of regenerative farmers coming together to help us on our policy agenda and solve some and advocate for our legislative agenda in the legislative session. So just wanted to show this list of names here of folks that have helped not only plan this event, but help work on that resolution. And we are grateful for them because the caucus felt this is necessary and needed, because despite soil's importance to human health, climate mitigation, the environment, nutrition, food, etc., there's little public awareness of the importance of soil protection. So now, hopefully, once this is adopted, we have a week-long celebration. We'll come back next year with a bill to make it permanent, and we can keep celebrating together for years to come. All right, so Mr. Jim Moseley, before I hand it over to Jim, I did just want to share a brief welcome for him. Jim has a rich history on and off the farm. He's served in many local, state, and national policy positions. He's played a role in developing public policy for ag, environment, and natural resources and conservation at the state and national levels. And now he's enjoying life on his regenerative farm with his wife, while still serving as a volunteer and counselor with several public interest activities. Fun note, Jim made the call that he would not be coming back and doing public events. So somehow he is here today, and we are super grateful. It might be because of Becky Doyle nudging him, but Jim, we're super grateful for your time with us and for making a special appearance for our Soil Health Week. Oh, you're on mute if you're talking, Jim.
Thank you. Yes, it is a pleasure to be here. And it was Becky Doyle, by the way, that convinced me. But we've been friends for many, many years. And so when Becky asked, she'll laugh about this, but when Becky asked, why I do. So first of all, I want to say this is important, what you're doing. And before I finish with a a brief introduction here, I think you'll get a good grasp of that. We have to do more of these kind of activities. And I'll just wait till I get to my points, but this is important what you're doing today. And the key to me are the presenters, Gene and the three farmers, and the information that they share, and also the questions that you all end up asking. A little bit about me. I'm a farmer in West Central Indiana, south of Purdue University, graduated from Purdue, and started farming. Kathy and I moved to this farm in 1971. I started out with conservation tillage. I introduced actually the chisel plow into this area when I first came to see this farm. It was in the fall of the year, and I noticed a lot of moldboard plows were out there working. And before we got into winter here and moved in, the land around here was all black because it had all been turned over. And I brought this thing called the chisel plow, and it was confounding to a lot of folks how that could possibly work. But it had some experience with it with a farmer that I worked with while going through Purdue. And I realized the concepts that he was trying to teach me, and it was useful. We did that for several years, but then we also began to realize with a crop consultant that we were developing a little bit of compaction still. And it was down at that layer right below the where the chisel plow was going. So we converted to ridge till in 1983, did that for 3 or 4 years. And then I decided to go to tracks on as many things as I could. And of course, tracks and ridges don't work. So we ended up in just straight flat out no-till. So this farm's been in no-till for quite some time. I've done a few other things, as was Liz indicated. I have been in Washington, D.C. a couple of times. First time I was there, I was the ag advisor to the administrator of EPA, and worked on some really thorny issues between agriculture and the environment. Then I moved over to USDA, was the undersecretary for Natural Resources Environment, and then came home, and 8 years later ended up going back to USDA as DepSec. As far as the farm goes, when we left in 2001, one of the requirements is that you have to give up your interests in a farm to serve in a position at that level. So our daughter took over the farming operation, and she still has the livestock side of it today. We have 7 kids. There's 4 boys and 3 girls. So the oldest daughter has a livestock operation. Then we have 2 sons who are also involved in farming. One of them took the land that we formerly rented, and has expanded off of that. And then I have another son that's working in a farming operation about 5 miles north of here. In 2010, I began to hear an awful lot of discussion about this soil health regenerative farming concept. And at the time, I was chairing the Eisenhower Foundation Ag Program. And that is an activity where we would select a farmer every year and send them to some country and let them look in depth at that country's agriculture, and come back and give a report. The requirement was to give a few speeches here and there. And the fellow that I was interested in was Dan DeSutter, and who lives fairly close to me, and I suggested that Dan apply, and the selection committee did actually select Dan. And so my request was for him to go to Australia because I had worked with the Aussies when I was in DC, and they contacted me about a program called Land Care. And the Australians have done a really good job of restoration of their land, probably better than I think any country in the world. And so I sent Dan over there to take a look at it and get into it in depth, look at the farming culture, at the policies and so forth, of which he came back and of course they had gone cold turkey on subsidies several years prior to that. And they did not have a NRCS like we do in their ag division. So they were fighting some uphill battles. But the fact was that they knew that they had to solve some problems on their landscape, and they were going about it. I also chaired an activity starting at that time called Agree, and it was funded by 8 large foundations. And a major theme of that activity was looking out 20, 30 years, what agriculture was likely to look like globally. And if that was acceptable, fine. Obviously, there were some things, some issues, some difficulties, some problems that we identified. And of course, the whole point to it was, so what are we going to do about it? And one of the things that just came to me was this fact that we are continuing to decarbonize our soils, and that meant a decline in soil quality over a period of years. So these things were not lost on me. This was an issue I had dealt with for several years as being in policy, having soil conservation with Soil Conservation Service when I was there under my jurisdiction. So I figured if I was going to get active in this area and promote it, I better get on board myself. So it was important to me to go out and understand from a practical perspective how this works and what needs to be done. And so I carved out 500 acres of land here that we own and decided that I was going to become a farmer once again. So in the period of 2011, 12, 13, 14, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I attended soil health meetings. I planted cover crops. I read a lot and constantly about this topic. In 2015, then, I had experimented enough. And 2015 was the first year that I went 100% cover crop, but I hadn't listened quite well enough. And I planted corn in the very 1st of May, and I planted it in cereal rye that was about knee high. And we were going to terminate it, since it was GMO, we were going to terminate it 3, 4, 5 days later. The only problem was 2 days later, it started to rain, and it rained for 6 weeks continuously. And we were not able to either kill it, the cover crop, nor were we able to get any nitrogen out there and side dress. So it was that first year experience was a little bit tough. Worst corn crop I had had on a field, worst corn crop I had ever had, made 81 bushel to the acre, and that was pathetic. I could have given up at that point in time, except that I realized that I was the one who had made the mistake. The concept was still sound. There wasn't anything wrong with what we were trying to accomplish, but it was my mistake. And so I needed to fess up to that, and obviously decided, since I made the mistake. Let's continue on. Today, we're doing well. Since we've been at it now for what, 6, 7 years, I'm using legumes and a grass, triticale, head of corn, trying to get some nitrogen out there, and cereal rye ahead of beans. We're planting everything green and then spraying it. And of course, we run some risk with that, but we don't wait for 2 or 3 days. The sprayer is right behind the planter. I've also been planting some wheat in the rotation, and the advantage of that is it gives me an opportunity to get a multi-species cover crop out there. Been using 12 to 15 different species, and that is important from the standpoint of diversity of roots in the soil and the exudates that they express, and that helps feed not only the bacterial level, but also mycorrhizal, which I'll talk about in a minute. So why do we do this? Those farmers that you're going to hear from, why are we involved in this? From my perspective, at the farm level, I found that we had, when I took the best tool you can use is a spade. And when I took that spade out to the field and I started digging, I could go down about 12 inches. And the soil in that profile was excellent. We talk about aggregation cottage cheese type of structure, and that's what I had. But below that, I was beginning to see a little bit of difficulty. So the whole goal now is to take that top 12 inches and push it on down to 36 inches where our tile is at, and allow root penetration easily into that entire profile. I mentioned mycorrhizal fungi. It's something that we have essentially eliminated on our cropland in this country, except for the few folks who have been doing some regenerative. It's out there. It's in our forests today. If I walk out in my forested area, I could find mycorrhizal fungi, but we wouldn't find it in the soil 5 or 6 years ago. Now, because of what we've been doing, I think we can identify that at this point. And of course, from the very practical level, the farm carbon is a big deal. And it's the increase in soil organic matter, which for every percent of organic matter we add, we can increase water holding capacity by 1 inch. So in the dry years, if you can get that over 10 years, if you can get that up 1.5%, 2%, you just have more resilience when the dry weather comes. At the 100,000 foot level, I have to go there because I spent so much time in policy. And I go back to the AGREE mission, which was looking at 20, 30 years forward. This was a defining point, and that we are continually losing that soil carbon globally. And we've degraded some soils to the point where the productivity is essentially lost. If you're going to grow something on those soils, you have to put all the inputs in every year. And the inputs we're talking about are nutrients, and they are finite. Plus, carbon is the building block of biology. And if you're going to improve the soil, you have to have biology to do that. And so, carbon continues to be important. That brings me then to the key question that I've asked for 35 years. And I hope that maybe these farmers can shed their experience and how they got there. But the question is, how do we motivate that next percentage, 10, 15, 20, 30% of farmers, to take a look at soil health, regenerative, and do things better, have better performance on their farm. I have to admit, I still don't have the perfect answer to that, though I've fussed around with it for a long, long while, except there is one fundamental in all of this that I do understand, and I kind of circle back to where I started, and that is the very beginning point has to be increase in knowledge. We can be forced to do something, but if we're voluntarily going to do it, it's just mandatory that we insert some knowledge into our mind as to what we're going to do and how we're going to carry it out and why are we doing it to begin with. And since agriculture generally talks about the need for all programs to be voluntary, I think that you can see the inference I'm making that it all comes back to knowledge, which is education, and that's what this program is about. There is quite a bit to know, in my judgment. This is not as easy as what no-till was to master. It's not simple. There is a lot of complexity to it, but the key thing is you can learn it. And my experience is that I used a couple of people as mentors, and I just got on the phone and called them, or I went to see them, and we worked through some of the difficulties and the problems, and that's how I learned. One of the very first questions, though, that we end up with, in my experience, as I go to meetings and I throw the idea out and listen to farmers, is that, well, I'm not sure that I can figure out how to make this pay. If I'm going to spend $30, $35 an acre, I'm not sure that I'm going to get enough yield to compensate for that. And the point is, in the first year or two, you won't. I think that's pretty well understood. This is something that's long-term, and you build that soil profile. Eventually, that pays rewards that are fairly substantial. But in the early years, it takes some time. With many years to destroy that biology, you don't fix it in a year. But over a period of 5 years, you have a chance at it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the remainder of these individuals that we're going to hear from today, and have Liz introduce our next speaker, who's I have some affiliation with. I'm a board member of AFT, and she's representing AFT today in this activity. So we're looking forward to what Jean's got to say to us about economics, which is a good beginning point when you're talking with a group of farmers. So Liz, I'm going to turn it back to you and let you introduce Jean.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, Jean Brokish is with the Midwest American Farmland Trust, and she is the program manager. So if you've been on any carbon market webinars, or just a lot of things with the Illinois Sustainable Agriculture Partnership, that is Jean assisting with those and helping to lead a lot of panels and conversations across Illinois. So at American Farmland Trust, she is coordinating and managing support for that group, ISAP, for both the Vermilion Headwaters Watershed Group and the Upper Macoupin Watershed Group. And before joining AFT, she spent 11 years leading conservation and outreach programs for Oahu, and that included oversight for multiple watershed implementation projects, and she helped create Hawaii's Women's Farmer Network. She grew up on a dairy farm in Southwest Wisconsin, and she enjoys gardening and being outdoors with her family. She has a Bachelor of Science in Agronomy from the University of Wisconsin at River Falls and a Master of Science in Soil Science. from Purdue University. So Jean, I need to find you in my little list here. There you are. All right, you're going to replace me. Here you come.
Great, and I will pull my screen up here if I can find that button. Oh, sorry, wait. I need to, you know what? I shrunk some stuff down so I could see what I needed to see, and I lost that green button. 1 second.
Happens all the time.
I know it happens all the time, right? Can you see that?
Yep, it looks great.
Okay, well, I am excited to be here. And Liz already did a great job introducing me and my role with AFT. And just gonna spend a few minutes and kind of share some of the insights that AFT has gleaned on the economic benefits of soil health today. And I'm gonna just start out quickly with an introduction of who and what American Farmland Trust is. It's a 40-year-old organization, and our mission really is to just save the land that sustains us. So that includes protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land, recognizing that we can't just, all of those really work together to just save the land. We can't just protect the farmland if we're not managing it well. And we need to be thoughtful about where we're planting our houses and how we're supporting those farmers. So it's a national organization, and within the Midwest and in Illinois, a lot of our efforts are really focused on promoting those sound farming practices. And thinking about that, you know, really the foundation of all of that is soil health. So we're in Soil Health Week, helpful to just set the boundaries or set the ground for us in terms of what is soil health. And this is kind of a truncated version of NRCS's definition, where soil health is the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem. So it's alive, and we need that soil alive and healthy and thriving in order to help sustain those plants, animals, and humans. This is kind of just a soil health journey. Jim mentioned, you know, he started with chisel plow, he introduced that, and then he shifted to some other sort of form. And over time, he kind of traveled down this soil health journey and tweaked his system. And I feel like a lot of farmers that I've had the honor of working with, you know, are kind of on a similar path. It's a journey. You try something and you integrate more. And so just context again, top right corner here, this is the soil health image with the 4 principles: minimizing disturbance, maximizing soil cover, maximizing biodiversity, and then maximizing those continuous living roots. Sometimes there's a 5th principle integrated, where we have the integrate livestock. And I think if anybody tuned into Rick Clark's presentation yesterday, I think that he actually worked his way all the way up to 7 principles in his presentation. So again, this is a journey for people, and we can continue to expand it as we get into it. And so like this slide, just last point on here, there's a list of, I don't know, 20 or so practices here. And all of those practices have the opportunity to promote soil health, improve soil health, and can be part of an individual farm's journey, where maybe you're starting with no-till and reduced till, and then you're integrating cover crops, diversifying your rotation, integrating livestock, et cetera. So you can see how you can progress through this journey. And over time, you know, there's a lot of benefits of investing in soil health. So this slide kind of breaks down the above ground and below ground environmental and crop production related benefits. So on the left here, we have the above ground and little arrows to indicate the respective change. So, you know, we're increasing the insulative cover, which is reducing evaporation, increasing infiltration and water storage, and which ultimately reduces that runoff and flooding risks, reduces the drought risk and the irrigation needs, increasing or improving weed suppression, which allows us to reduce our herbicide use and fuel use. And then on the right, we have the below ground benefits, increased soil organic matter and carbon, reducing that compaction, increasing diversity and reducing the plant stress and pesticide use, and then lastly, just increasing nutrient cycling, which can allow you to reduce fertilizer inputs, nitrous oxide emissions, and water pollution. And so just translating this again with an economic emphasis, put little green check marks in terms of which ones of those can have some direct economic impacts or benefits to the farm. So the question then really becomes, well, like, how much, if we know and we're saying that there's the potential for these economic benefits of soil health, how much are we actually, what does that translate to dollars? So one tool to estimate the economic benefits is a partial budget analysis. And this is basically an economic tool that looks at the effect of changes in a farming operation in this case. And so it focuses only on those variables that are affected by the change. So really it kind of gives you a before and after cost and benefit of implementing soil health practices in this case. So recently, or it's kind of ongoing, American Farmland Trust has a project and has been instrumental in leading the effort to quantify those economic and environmental benefits of soil health, and has looked at a number of different parameters or a number of different, management and economic changes, and plugged it into that partial budget analysis. So things like tillage and machinery cost, and that includes both fuel and labor as well. Looking at the nutrient management and whether there's kind of the whole picture, fertilizer inputs, and then pesticides, including herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, learning costs. I think this is something we don't often think of, but time is money, and farmers' time is valuable, and there is a real need to do some research and improve your knowledge base and some trial and error. So those learning costs are actually integrated into this partial budget analysis. And then the last is just looking at yield changes. So this whole process really focused on farmers who had been using soil health practices for multiple years. Jim mentioned that you don't often make money in year one, or maybe you don't see an improvement in yield in year one. And so over time, we wanted to find some farmers who were really successful and pretty advanced on their soil health journey. And we were able to develop 9 soil health case studies. And of those 9 that were created in the last couple of years, 7 of them include row crop farms. So 2 in Illinois, 2 in Ohio, and 3 in New York. And so we're going to just do a quick look at the Illinois case studies here, but I do have the URL for a lot of information. If you want to review all of the case studies or learn more about the methods that were used, you can visit farmland.org/soil health case studies, and I'll take you to a page with lots of information there. So our first Illinois farmer is the Thorndike farm, the Ford County, Illinois. Larry Thorndike, he started growing cover crops over 40 years ago, currently farms with his wife, Beth, and their son, Adam. The family grows corn and soybeans on 2,600 acres and uses a combination of strip till, no-till cover crops and nutrient management. And so through Larry's and the Thorndike farm partial budget analysis, you come up with these 2 charts, and there's a lot of information here. I'll walk you through it a little bit. The top left is a summary of costs. So you start at the top with any decreases in income. In this case, Larry didn't feel there was a decrease in income with where he was after implementing these soil health practices for multiple years. But he did recognize an increase in costs, right? So the most significant costs were the cover crop seed itself at $39 an acre. And the learning costs, there's increased pesticide use with the shift to no-till at $5, and then a combined learning cost of about $2.61. So you add those up, and we're looking at about a $26 decrease in net income, or a $26 expense per acre based on the use of these soil health practices. And then the bottom right, the green box, shows the increases. And so Larry estimated a pretty conservative yield increase of 4% for soybean and 2% for corn, and calculated that or translated that into dollars of $12.95 per acre. But the greater impact really is the decrease in costs for him. So nutrient savings of $66 an acre, because he was able to reduce his fertilizer inputs, and then some reduced machinery costs due to the fact that he's just tilling less, and that he is actually combining some of his nutrient applications with that strip till. So he's a machinery cost there. our machinery cost savings there. And you add that all up and you get an increase in net income of $34 or $60, sorry. Increases in income were about $60, and you combine those two and you're looking at an overall increase in profit of $34 an acre. These are 2018 dollars. And so I think this is important to understand too, like we're looking at nutrient savings based on 2018 costs and prices, with nutrient prices increasing dramatically, and they're in the news. And even herbicide, pesticide costs are expected to go up. You know, the ability to reduce your inputs could have a greater benefit to your bottom line. This is just shifting then to the other Illinois farm. Jim Ift and his wife Julie, they farm in Ford County or in Livingston County, Illinois, and with their son Josh. The family grows corn and soybeans on 1,800 acres and uses soil health practices on all their acres, which include both rented and owned acres, using no-till cover crops and nutrient management. And similar tables for the Ift farm. We have the decreases in net income in the top left, and very similar. So we have the cover crop costs of $30 an acre. We have the learning costs of $4.74 and a variable rate technology upcharge of 50 cents an acre for a combined expense of $18. And on the right, then we have those increases in net income where estimating at $5 bushels per acre increase for soybean yield due to the fact that we're using the cover crops and the soil health is improving over time. And again, decreased costs have a pretty significant role here too, where we're decreasing the fertilizer inputs and we're decreasing those herbicide inputs, and reaching increased net income of $39, and so 39 minus 18, an overall benefit of $21 per acre. So just tables like that exist for all 9 farms, and just summarizing here the 7 farms with the row crop production. Not all of the farms reported yield increases, so I think that's important to recognize, but all of the farms reported some sort of benefit by reducing inputs. And you can see on the left, the circle on the left there, average benefits of reducing machinery, fuel, and labor savings is $31 per acre. Pesticide savings of $17 per acre per year, and fertilizer savings of $36. And when you put all that together, average increased net income across those 7 farms was $37 per acre. So this is real dollars and cents that we're translating this into in terms of the benefits of soil health over time. And I agree, and I recognize that this is a relatively small data set, so I don't want you to just take our word for it. I do have some data from the Precision Conservation Management Program, which is a program of Illinois Corn, Illinois Soybean Association. And they've been doing this for a number of years, and they have something like 2,600 fields, data points from fields in their database. And they looked at the 25% most profitable, or the top quarter. Those fields, about 600 of them that were the most profitable for farms, what was the tillage situation there? And you can see that of those, the table there is showing the corn, the most profitable corn fields. 25% were 13% no-till, 12% strip-till, and then 39% were one pass or less. And so 64% overall of the top most profitable fields had some sort of reduced tillage, which obviously is a major tenet of the soil health principles. And similar results for soybean, where 42% no-till plus 1% strip-till, and then adding the 16% for one pass of tillage, somewhere around 59% were one pass or less. So again, 59% of the top profitable fields were using some sort of reduced tillage type system. The cover crop results from PCM don't align as well with the results I just shared with you from our soil health case studies. And based on my conversations with PCM representatives, I think one of the biggest explanations for that is that we were looking at farms who had been using soil health for multiple years, and many of their farms, or the majority of their farms, are maybe doing covers for the first or second year, and they're not really seeing the benefits yet of those practices. And then just kind of one more context here, even other studies show similar results. So we have a headline from Soil Science Society of America, positive associations of soil organic matter and crop yields. We have a study showing soil organic matter protects yields and lowers crop insurance payments under drought. And then the green table in the middle there with the green header, these are benefits reported from the 100 farmers as part of the Soil Health Institute survey. And you can see 67% identified or recognized some sort of yield benefit as a result of the soil health practices. But greater percents show, the ability to reduce inputs. 83% can reduce that fertilizer. 97% are acknowledging improved crop resiliency, and then 93% are increasing field access, which is really hard to actually tie a dollar value to, but just from logistically and a management, it's really important to realize that benefit, and it's a real benefit for farmers. So just kind of in summary, I think good soil is insurance for the farmer. It increases that crop resiliency. It creates opportunity for those reduced inputs, which again is important when input prices really skyrocket and you might need to cut back. Having good soil will reduce or mitigate any negative effects of reducing your inputs. It keeps those soil and nutrients in the field, which in Illinois and in the Midwest and Mississippi River Basin is important too, because we're all trying to work towards this nutrient loss reduction strategy goals. And then reduces greenhouse gas emissions and just overall improves that return on investment. So with that, I just a few things to keep in mind, that again, soil health is a journey. And like any journey, it takes time and commitment on the part of the farmer, but it also takes time and financial investments. And I think that that's really, bring that up to just underscore the importance of Senate Bill 3471, which is the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act, which is in front of the Illinois legislature right now, and if passed would increase and help prioritize technical and financial assistance for critical areas. AFT and Illinois Stewardship Alliance and multiple other groups are taking active roles in promoting the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act, and there are ways for you to lend your support too. And I know that this is also going to be discussed during tomorrow's Soil Health Summit by my colleague Max Webster, so you can tune in for that too and learn more. And with that, I'll just give some gratitude to my colleagues at AFT for their work on the partial budget analysis, to PCM for providing some data, and of course, Illinois Stewardship Alliance for inviting me to share this info, and ultimately, and most importantly, to the farmers who are doing the hard work of caring for our soil. And I will turn it over back to you guys, because I'm really eager to hear from this farmer panel, and invite anybody to reach out with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Yes, we can put some questions in the chat, and we will get to those in just a moment. I am going to, let's see, I'm going to bring everybody out into the spotlight. Frank, I'm pulling you up here. Well, Lee, let's actually hear from you first, Lee Curby, to do an introduction, and then we'll hear from Joe Curless and Frank Rademacher. So Lee, here you are. All right, welcome, Lee.
Hello. So like Liz said, I'll introduce myself. My name is Lee Curby. I farm about 700 acres between Auburn and Chatham, which is right within the Lake Springfield watershed. We're pretty much right in the heart of it. I graduated from Illinois State University in 2007 with a degree in ag business. Had the conversation with my dad that I was ready to come back and farm, and he's like, okay, I'm not ready to retire, so you're going to have to find something else to do for a while. So I moved to Colorado and spent some time working on a ranch out there and kind of getting some different experiences, I guess, that I think when I look back were really important. In 2015, I was granted the opportunity by my dad, who was then ready to retire. My wife and I had our first son, and he said, you know, I think now's a good time for me to step aside and I'll watch the kids and you can start farming. So in 2015, I moved back to the farm. My dad had been doing no-till, strip-till since probably the late mid 90s, somewhere in there. So I had already seen, you know, we had transitioned from pretty heavy tillage to no-till, and had seen the benefits of, you know, going down that road. He had done most of the learning curve for me. When I came back and bought him out, the equipment was already set up for no-till and strip-till, and he had just begun to kind of implement cover crops. So in 2015, started farming, continued down the road of no-till and cover. Being as we are in the Lake Springfield watershed, and one of our farms is within less than a quarter mile of Lake Springfield. It makes you very aware of what you do on that farm and how quickly it makes it into a public supply as drinking water. It makes you very cognizant of that. And it really encouraged us to be as responsible with how we farm and how quickly it can impact those very close to you. You know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, everything that we do here has an effect on things in the Gulf. Here it's almost even quicker than that. Everything we do on the farm immediately affects those that drink the water that go into Lake Springfield. So that's been a pretty big driver in how we do things on our operation. With my dad stepping aside, I started farming with two other gentlemen. So between the three of us, we farmed right at about 2,500 acres. At this point, we are now 100% cover on all the acres that I farm, and the majority of the rest of the acres are all cover as well. Everything else is no-till or strip-till. So that's kind of a little bit about our operation. I guess I will speak to a little bit about what Jim had asked us after our pre-planning meeting, and he had asked, you know, why is it that you do what you do, and why do you do it that way? So in the fall of 2015, when I planted my first, or was preparing to plant my first crop, planted my first 40 acres of cover, put on all my ammonia for my next year's crop. And around Christmas time, the ground was froze and we got 5 inches of rain over the course of about 3 days. Everything that I thought that I knew that I was doing right looked terrible. We farm in pretty flat ground, and if it's not no-tilled or strip-tilled, it's contoured. You know, I put all my ammonia on it with contours of the hills. We have terraces, we have waterways. We try to do everything we can to do to stop erosion. And in 1 year, it looked like I had just done complete tillage and everything was washed and looked absolutely horrible. At that point, my dad said, you know what? I'm not farming anymore, but I'm going to tell you right now, I think that covers are the answer, and that you should probably figure out a way to plant covers on every single acre. I said, well, I'm not sure how you expect me to raise a corn crop when I've planted. I'm going to put my strips on and then I'm going to cover it with rye, and then I got to figure out how to get it killed in the spring. But I agree with you. What we're seeing as far as erosion here is unacceptable. And, you know, I have the benefit now of farming with a gentleman that, you know, has been doing the cover game for a long time. And every time I think about, you know, yeah, it'd be easier if I just went straight strip till and no till, he's always there to encourage me. And I lean pretty heavy on Dick Lyons too for encouragement to continue to do the right thing. And the other two reasons that I do what I do is, you know, we don't own all the ground that we farm. We only own about 80 acres. But I have two young children, both of whom are pretty well enamored with farming. And I may not be able to hand down a quantity of farm ground to them, but the quality that I hand down is just as important. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about our operation and why we do what we do. So I hope that helps. I'm open to any questions.
Okay, good, Lee. Liz, were there any specific questions?
No, I think we're just gonna we're gonna get through some introductions here and have Joe go next, and then Frank for some quick intros, and then we can get into some questions.
Okay, I just went to a crazy screen that says ditch the 40-minute limit. That's something I got to figure out how to get back to you. So, okay, yeah, Joe, go while I solve this problem. You go ahead.
Okay, here you are, Joe. Thank you, Lee. Might need to take it off mute, Joe.
There we
There
go.
we are.
You got me now?
Yep.
You can see it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. I have a small farm. My name's Joe Curless. I'm from Astoria, Illinois. I come at this from a little different angle. We have an aerial application business as the kind of the primary income source for our operation. And when I re-entered the farm here in Western Illinois, I had always known that pretty much our entire farm is sitting at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. It is literally on the river bluff here in West Central Illinois, on the Illinois River Bluff. So we've got very low CECs, very low organic matters, and that was where I kind of started on the farm, trying to figure out a way to build those CECs and organic matters, because obviously we have a water holding capacity where we're at. We are blessed to be in Illinois, but not with good soils where we're at here. So I started from scratch, and of course I started in 2008 using the airplane on probably about 100 acres, and then I've grown it to 100% of what we farm here as well. And everything that I have during my presentation later today is been aerial applied. So I've done nothing in terms of do anything with a planter. So I'm not doing it correctly. I'm doing it with the airplane and trying to figure out the right seeds that work out of the airplane with our method of application. We use strip till on corn, no till on soybeans, and then one day it dawned on me when I was using anhydrous that why are all these worms, why are all these seagulls, hitting the field behind me? Well, it dawned on me that the anhydrous, which is not bad, was boiling all of the worms that do a lot of work for us out of the soil profile, just like it burns our eyes. And from that point forward, I started using 32%, which is a little more expensive, but I feel like it's a little less caustic on the soil, and trying to grow that soil health as much as possible. It's still getting nitrogen there, but not in that form that is in that gaseous form that is not advantageous to some of the earthworm population. So that's pretty much what I need to say for now. Liz, if you want to move on. You got a copy?
Yes. Frank, you will be up next for your introduction. Joe, if you could just stop sharing screen, and
Yes, ma'am.
Frank, I'll bring you up front. Thank you, Joe.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
There we go.
So yeah, my name is Frank Rademacher. I'll pull through this pretty quick. I've only got a couple of slides. That's what we were planting into last couple of years. So we are from East Central Illinois, Gifford, Rantoul area, northeast of Champaign. I graduated in 2018 with a degree in crop science, a focus on pest management, so weeds, diseases, and insects. Got that at the U of I. And then I also work for Illinois Corn Growers Association and Illinois Soybean. Their conservation branch is called Precision Conservation Management. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then on the farm side, we farm about 600 acres of non-GMO corn and soybeans, which is all no-till and cover crops. So PCM, just going over that real quick. Again, Illinois Corn Growers, really their goal there is to put the finances behind conservation. So we do a lot of data gathering where we run everybody's numbers, field passes, timings, yields to come up with numbers, actual numbers behind these conservation practices that are gaining popularity. Beyond that, we want to be a resource for agronomy questions. So I field, gosh, a ton of, that's kind of my whole year is giving out money and answering questions. So spring management of cover crops is my planter setup to plant into this. That's kind of what we work on. And then, of course, we have several partnerships with people like Pepsi, local elevators that are wanting to promote these practices. So they have a lot of cost share dollars. So that's kind of what we do at PCM. And then, like I said, I also farm. My dad and we farm. I joined the operation in 2018. And since that point, we've been all no-till, all cover crops, and all non-GMO. So before that, Dad had played around a little bit with some of those concepts, but with me joining the farm, we knew we needed a little extra income. So that's kind of why we made that change. Since then, we've moved pretty fast, pretty drastically reduced most of our inputs, if not eliminated a lot of them. And we're doing that primarily now with high biomass cover crops, and we've got a planter mounted roller crimper from Dawn equipment that we're using. And then the latest big milestone was we're 100% insecticide free as of last season. And then lastly, just our goals, why we farm the way we do. We really want to maximize profit while we minimize any environmental impacts of how we farm. And then really the overall goal there is to really to be able to anticipate any changes in markets over the next few years, pests, regulations. Obviously, I'm 26, so I've got to do this for a long time. And so if we can anticipate some of those changes early, that's kind of the goal. And then we're using that system to go to the most efficient operation we can get to in terms of field passes, labor input, equipment. And ideally, we can eventually get down to basically 4 passes for each crop where we're planting, spraying, harvesting, and then planting cover crops. So that's all I've got.
Okay, I'm gonna start with a question for Frank, and we'll work backwards here. Frank, you mentioned input reduction, and I did hear you say that you would eliminate insecticides, but I'm curious how you've done on your fertilizer and your herbicide in a percentage, or where are you at now and where do you think you can go with it?
Okay, so the big one is nitrogen. So MRTN rate is probably around, or the most efficient economic rate is probably 180 pounds for most people. We've been able to dip below that using a few tools, longer term no-till, cover crops, more efficient placement. So nitrogen, we're getting down to around about 130 pounds for next year is our goal, plus some biologicals and the cover crop use and that kind of stuff. Insecticides, that was a several years long process of trials. And then we eventually figured out that that wasn't working. We weren't getting a benefit out of that. We are not using phosphorus and potassium other than some starter usage. We may play around with that a little bit and add some of that in when appropriate, but I don't think we've seen any ill effects from that. And then as far as herbicide goes, we're probably down to, we've probably reduced about 25% of what a normal program is. But if everything goes well, we can usually pretty easily reduce about half of what most people would be using.
That's pretty impressive. Okay, Joe, a couple things here. I noticed you had in your photos, you had multi-species cover crop picture, it appeared to me. How are you using the multi-species in your rotation? How are you accomplishing that?
Well, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. It is, I don't know if it's really qualified as multi-species. Again, we're trying to use the airplane with everything that we do. We can get across the ground very quickly with the airplane and in a timely manner. And we're putting it on when we can typically get water or germination in that late August, middle August, all the way through middle of September. So the species that I've been using, Jim, is cereal rye and dwarf Essex rape. They work out of the airplane. And I also use purple top turnips as well as triticale out of the airplane. Those are the big ones right there. Those seems to work very consistently. And that's the depth of my multi-species.
Any sunflowers, Joe?
I don't think they'll work. I just don't think they have an aggressive enough radical that they'll really work with our method of application, sir.
Okay.
And anything that looks like a soybean probably will not work in at that time of the year. So.
Okay. Lee, back to you. I mentioned one of the big difficulties I had that first year that we went 100%. Have you had some difficulties that you'd like to share? Because we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes.
It's true.
Yeah, we've had our fair share of failures as well. I guess the big one was getting cereal rye on too heavy. We like to stick around that 30 to 35 pounds. And even then, sometimes that feels like if you get it on early and it gets rain on it, it can get pretty aggressive. But the first year we tried in front of soybeans where we went all out, we had about 40 pounds of cereal rye out there and got it killed fairly early. It was maybe 8-10 inches tall, but it was thick. And then got pretty substantial rain on it right after planting beans, and it turned into a sponge that just never seemed to dry. So similar to your story with corn, it was a learning curve that you need to be aggressive early or plant, and then we've had success planting and then letting it grow and let beans emerge and then coming in and terminating. But that first year where we had it terminated and it wasn't quite dead, but it wasn't quite alive, and then got a bunch of rain on it, was a mess.
Okay. Well, you were one that brought up mentors, but I'd ask all three of you, where you get your information and where you learn from, and have mentors been of value, or have you served as a mentor to some other folks in this process?
Yeah, I think that experience plays a big role in learning this, and to think you're going to go out and just seed cover crop without getting some information on what people have done wrong and what they've done right, you're not really setting yourself up for success. I have relied pretty heavily on mentors. And that we now have a gentleman that's farming with us that last year was his first cover crop, and we've my mentors and I have walked through sort of our struggles and tried to help coach him through some of the difficulties. But I guess the biggest mentor advice was the one that I received from my dad when it regards no-till and cover. And he said, you know, everybody has a bad year. And when somebody who's doing conventional farming has a bad year, it's the weather's fault. And when somebody who's doing no-till and cover, everybody wants to blame it on no-till and cover. So that would be my advice, I guess.
Frank, where have you gotten your information? Of course, you have this company that's actually giving advice to individuals and consulting with them. So can you share anything of value there as far as what you're doing and how you're helping those individuals?
Sure. So I guess we were kind of a unique case out, when we kind of started this, because Dad started his first field of experimenting was, I think, 2013, 2014, which was when this was just starting to hit mainstream, a lot of this stuff. So he didn't really have a whole lot of, locally, there was really nobody to talk to. We do have a neighbor that had been doing it for a while, but beyond that, it was mostly just trial and error and a lot of internet work. There's a lot of great, internet resources that we used. And then coming out of college, by the time I had my agronomy degree, that helped us out a lot, to be able to draw back on that. So then, we had been doing it so long at that point that we kind of were that base in the area where people started coming to for advice. So then I've taken that on-farm experience and the agronomy degree then to be able to go through PCM to offer basically the same services. Okay.
Joe, you've been involved in a different methodology for application. If I remember right, you may have come to that because you are a pilot. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And are you flying your own yourself, or someone else flying that on for you?
Typically, I am a pilot. Yes. I usually have guys that fly for us here. I'm distracted all summer long with different projects and issues at the business. And so I don't have a pilot brain at 15 feet off the ground. But I do fly. I just fly a little higher than our pilots here. So yeah, I've tried to focus. I started with annual ryegrass, and because of our hard soils here, I mean, our soils are very atypical Illinois. It's as hard as the road that you drive on with our low CCs, high clay content, yellow and gray clays here. And I was trying anything I could to loosen those soils up and not do tillage to build the organic matter, because I was always taught that every time you touch it, you're destroying that organic matter. And so I started with annual ryegrass, and I quickly learned that it is a very impressive, and we can do it with the airplane. It does a great job, but it's a management nightmare if you're farming any scale at all. I can share those mistakes with someone if they want to know at some point, but it's an animal. But in terms of its aggressiveness in the soil, but it was real problematic. So I started from scratch. Honestly, I've just tried to learn on my end how to make, try to make the airplane look as good as we can do with the seeds that we have, because we're not planting it correctly. We're using a crescent wrench. But we know that because we are planting it at a time of the year that we can get across it and we got moisture, and then trying to make a happy farmer out of it too, because we know we're changing their typical method by incorporating the cover crops. And I was trying to blend that, and annual ryegrass was probably the big mistake that I made, Jim.
Okay, there's so much that we could cover here, and
a lot of rabbit holes.
I'm looking at the time. Maybe Liz, we ought to check in with you and see if there's questions that have come in through chat that these fellows could kind of help us answer, or Jean even. Jean's still with us. Well, I'm not sure she is. Okay.
Yes, Jean is still here. I do have a couple questions I can ask you, and then I can hand it back over to you. So earlier there was, I think this was one for Jean. If you're still with us, Jean, if there was any interest in conducting analysis on vegetable or specialty crop farms?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the two case studies that did not include row crop production were actually almond growers out of California. So that's kind of a specialty crop. But one of the challenges, and there's interest in doing more of this. There's actually the creation of an online tool where farmers can go and kind of play with it and plug and chug and do some of their own analysis. The limitation or the challenge in terms of specialty crop and vegetable crop is that a lot of this is like any economic model. It's based on some assumptions and lots of data, and the actual data for like yield and prices of specialty crops is much more variable and nuanced, and also even like machinery costs for vegetable production is a little more variable. So I think you could run the analysis and kind of do that partial budget analysis on a vegetable specialty crop, but I think you would just have to be really cognizant of the assumptions and take it with maybe a larger grain of salt.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Jean.
We have a question here that is one of it's the proverbial elephant in the room, I think. And the question is about land leasing, rental, cash leasing year to year. And I hear farmers say, well, in fact, a good friend of mine who is a regenerative farmer, he has a farm. He says, I can't make the investment there because it's close to an area that at any given point in time, it can be sold for development. And, it's not worth putting the investment in. So any thoughts, ideas on this question of renting additional land and how you approach it? What you think about the leasing situation and long-term leases, flex leases? Any thoughts, guys? Jean?
I want to hear from the farmers, but they're also quiet. I'll weigh in first and just kick it off, Jim, with the response that I think a lot of it, like in a situation where development may come in, it may not make a lot of sense. But if you've been, a lot of leases are year to year, but you find that you're working with the same landowner tenant combination for multiple years. And I really think that based on some of the research, again, that AFT did with non-operating landowners and farmers, we just kind of revealed like there's a little bit of a disconnect. Farmers are interested in these practices and landowners are interested in these practices, and they're just not really having that right conversation to understand how they can work together to do it. And so maybe it is a slightly different lease. Maybe there's more of a shared cost, shared risk, shared input, or shared income kind of lease structure that needs to be looked at. But I think I would really just encourage farmers to have that conversation with their landowners if it's something that's important to them. And that's my perspective as a non-farmer. So I'm just gonna toss that out there and let the farmers react to it.
Yeah, and of course I'm a landowner waiting on that young man to come in and rent and convince me. But I've already made the decision as a landowner. My concern is this farm is going to continue to be farmed in this method indefinitely. So kind of the flip side of it. But frankly, Joe, any thoughts on these rentals and leases and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just depends on the individual partnership. And again, like Gene said, just having that conversation. There's going to be landowners that are interested and those that are not. But I think it's something that, at least in the program, I'm starting to hear a lot more of is we've got farmers in the program that have picked up more acres because the local farm manager saw that they were using cover crops and the current farmer did not want to. I mean, that's going to keep happening, especially, without sounding bleak, the demographics of the farming community and land ownership, that's a very fluid picture. And as land starts to change hands, and different parts of the family are involved now with the farm that never had a say in the farm, I think the next 5-10 years, you're going to see a lot of change like that. And we've seen a lot of that locally of just people that have interests now because of, so-and-so is involved and they never had a say in it and they want to do things differently.
Yeah. Lee, Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I would go off of what Frank said, the dynamic of farm ownership's changing. And that can be difficult both ways because you have a very large disconnect now. It's not dad's farm anymore. It's maybe 2 or 3 generations down the road. But, I guess I'll say that I'll answer it this way. You asked, how do we get the next farmer to implement no-till and cover? You engage the landowner. And if you engage the landowner and create that connection between the farm and what they contribute and make them realize that they still have a say in how the farm is run, not just renting the farm, I think you make tremendous strides pretty quickly in the implementation of these practices, that are regenerative.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put a plug in. Joe, did you have a comment?
The comment that I have is, if we're bringing it back to economics, is one is erosion. And of course, the landowners are interested in the erosion on the soil, which is big in my geography. The economics that I think that we're overlooking, and it's really hard to put economics around this, is nitrogen at $1 a unit now. If we can capture that nitrogen, hold it in organic form over the winter, especially after soybeans that we know are fixing 40 pounds or roughly 40 pounds or perhaps more, that's leaking into the tile, that's getting into that watershed. There's $16 in our, I'm told it's around 16 units is what they're finding in that nitrogen behind soybeans. Going into corn, there's $16 there that could be shared between the producer, the landowner, and the tenant. And then what's very difficult is the phosphorus and potassium that are being moved off the soil during those high rainfall events. And those are hard numbers to capture, but I think they're talking points that are very important that need to be considered, because that's obviously with the costs that have gone up over the last couple of weeks. The P and the K is expensive as well, that's being moved off the soil. So those 3 things can be I think leveraged to a high degree to convince both sides that this is an advantage, and it's well worth their efforts to learn from it and struggle through it rather than using their old techniques.
Okay, I'm going to put a plug in for AFT, Gene, and about our we call it, is it Women in Agriculture program? We're working with ladies who own farmland, and we bring them in and we talk with them about the various elements of owning land and renting it and so forth. And I think one of the topics that we share is how that farm is managed environmentally. And so it's a way to kind of put a push on things through the person that owns the farm back to the farmer. That's correct, right, Gene?
Yeah, I just put a link to our Women for the Land program, which is reaching both women farmers, but it started originally just as a recognition where a lot of landowners, a little stereotypical, I understand, but you know, a husband and wife might own land, the husband passes away, and then there's an elderly woman who is suddenly in charge and managing this lease and isn't accustomed to making management decisions on the farm and isn't even necessarily versed in what those management decisions entail. And so really it was just kind of a process of understanding their perspectives and needs and bringing them into the fold and the conversation so that they could have a discussion with their tenant farmers and ask them questions and make sure that they were both understanding and supporting their farmer, but also seeing their land managed in the way they wanted to. And so part of this website also, I think, includes that non-operating landowner survey that we did that I mentioned earlier, where we just really found that a lot of the values are the same. It's just the key, again, is having that conversation. So recognizing who is making those decisions and making sure they have the right information is really kind of all part of what Women for the Land is about.
Summary is communication, communication, communication between people. One of the more difficult things that we undertake, but it's essential. And if we can have the right conversations, we can make progress. I've got a question here. The status of creating markets to compensate farmers for growing carbon, and the kind of follow up on that is that Rick Clark, who's a good friend of mine, told us yesterday that no metric available to measure carbon sequestration is so accurately, cheaply, and repeatedly. And Rick must have made the comment, we can't base a market on an element that we can't measure. Makes sense. So are carbon markets going to be viable in your judgment, or is this something that, you know, us regen folks just aren't going to worry about? I would preface your statement with the fact that my experience, and I've called several of them just to practice and have fun, that I need not apply because I've already done it. And I think it's the concept of additionality. I think that's a ridiculous argument because carbon sequestration is an annual event. You get it every year. So the additionality is that I'm putting carbon in every year as well. It doesn't make any difference my starting point. Okay, so that's a philosophical disagreement that I have with these folks. But I'm just curious what you all think about where we are in the whole carbon market question.
So PCM, some of the programs that we do help people with are carbon programs, just help them navigate that. And we're not compensated for that, obviously, or anything like that. But I think our goal in doing that is we don't think they're going away. I think there's going to be some form of a carbon market for a long, long time. And we kind of want to help people through that and again, get kind of a backdoor view about how those, companies are run, because they all do something different. The general advice I give is don't bet the whole farm, because I think there's good evidence that carbon price is going to go up, right? So maybe don't lock the whole farm into a 10-year contract for anything.
Okay.
That would be the general advice there. I've always kind of wished that maybe the focus wasn't on carbon credits, but it was on like water quality credits. And I think that'll happen eventually, but that seems like a much easier starting point from measurement and actually being able to affect it in 1 year. But there's been little progress on that I've heard, but I've heard rumors of that kind of stuff coming out.
Yeah. There is a policy proposal. I've worked on it a little bit in DC right now that would actually compensate farmers substantial amount. We're talking as much as maybe $100 an acre. And it is based on not only carbon, but water quality, which the work that's been done on that is the public value of water quality is, I think, something like almost 3 times the value of carbon sequestration at this moment. And yet, we're highly focused on carbon sequestration, but what we can do in regen with water quality, I think, is dramatic. So there's some thought being given to the broader range of issues than just carbon. Lee, Joe, you got anything to add to this part of the conversation?
I really haven't gone down that rabbit hole as far as carbon programs yet. It seems a little bit too much like the Wild West out there, with everybody trying to put their spin on it. It's almost a pay for practice type deal at this point, it seems like to me, versus actual carbon credit offset, I think.
Joe?
I have not been involved in any yet. I've done this on my own. I'm open to it, but I haven't. I've explored it, but I haven't been happy because of the lengthy contracts. The length of the contracts is my concern. So, but
you're not going to go moorboard your land in order to get into the program.
No, sir.
Okay, that's the important question. All right, here's a question that
Jim, sorry, could I just put this in this chat, and I just want to emphasize this for everybody, because ISAP did a fair amount of work kind of evaluating the different market opportunities. So I did put a link in the chat for anyone who's interested in that. And to just pick up on Joe's point, the contract lengths are not all long, and so there are some shorter contracts. There's even some markets that are incorporating some look back windows, so it addresses that additionality piece. So I'm not saying that the markets are going to make sense for everybody, and it's certainly depending on where you are on that soil health journey really dictates how much of the carbon pie is available for you. Definitely. And if you're pretty far, then there's not very much pie left for you. But just encourage people to really evaluate it and look at it. And I'm not advocating for market participation, but I do think that it's a potential there, and it is something that's worth at least being informed about and making a decision to see if it's right for your farm.
It's a little bit like renewable energy and the siting of windmills and solar. The market is fluid, and I agree with you, Frank. We don't know for sure what the values of carbon is really going to be as we move along in time, and as more countries might put additional restrictions. Obviously, it would seem that the market is likely to go up. Okay. Here's a question that comes from a person, Liz Ruppel, or who she is, but it's, what do you all need, or what is needed for Illinois to continue to, I'm going to say, add to the land that's being farmed regeneratively? What's your thinking about how do we get the next steps? How do we get the next 20% of producers to come on board? You all come to the same conclusion that I have after 35 years. It's not an easy question.
The one suggestion I have is ask the farmers, give me your worst ground, and try to get them enrolled in the worst ground first. They already know it's a problem child in their operation. How do we get that problem child, off of dead center? That would be the first place I would start.
No, I think that's a very good suggestion, because the poorest land responds the most to these practices. And it's a matter of restoring some of that organic matter and that carbon.
That's right.
Frank or Lee, you want to take that one on?
Yeah. Gosh, there's 100 ways to take this question, but I mean, there's a certain group of maybe farmers that a little more pressure could be put on that group. I mean, if you think about, your seed companies of the world, right, that at a corporate level really promote the whole, and a lot of them have their own carbon programs at, a corporate level, like a Corteva or a DeKalb or, but then you drive by their seed production fields and maybe that's not being carried out at the field level, right? So there's groups like that, or groups that sell to certain end users, right? Where things that are set on the corporate level at some point need to trickle down to the field level. So there's that. I think, as years go by, we're going to see more people doing it for weed control. I think that's kind of the next level, is that there's people that are seriously battering on the idea of, do I need to buy a row crop cultivator, right? And yeah, I know, but I've heard that last couple of years, that kind of stuff. So if we can get more messaging out there on, hey, rye can solve a lot of those issues for you, stuff like that. There's a million responses to improve or to increase regenerative practices.
Okay. Lee, any thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Joe. I think if you can get them to try it on their worst acre, that's where they're going to see their biggest return. And if you have a successful first try, it sure makes it a lot easier to continue to add to that situation.
Yeah, I agree. And that successful first try, it seems to me, is really dependent upon having someone, an individual that you can talk to, work through the issues with, and you can meet them in a variety of ways, going to soil health field days and things like that. If you're the kind of person that can meet people easily, why, you're going to pick up somebody in that group that is going to be willing to help, because there are a number of folks that believe in this passionately enough that they will offer their help. I was going to make a comment that I think if we started talking about the drivers of change in the direction of getting more producers. I'm working on a project right now, and I won't go into great detail, but it is an investment opportunity. It's a fund, and we're seeing this globally. There's several of these beginning to develop, where environmentally conscious investors who have a significant amount of wealth are looking for places that they can invest that capital, but they want it to be done right. And the one that I am becoming familiar with realizes that it's a 5-year process from start to kind of where you get to the point where you'll not ever go back. And so they're talking about a 10-year contract. I'm going to make the suggestion that there's this number of farmers out there, and particularly young farmers, if they could get a 10-year contract for doing regenerative agriculture on a farm, they probably look very favorably upon that. Seems to me that might be a motivator. Any thoughts in that direction from you guys? Would you consider that if you were expanding your operation, would you consider a long-term contract such as that? Okay.
If I knew how to do it, I think that's what's holding a lot of these guys back, is they know what they know and it works, and dad did it, grandpa did it, and they're afraid to step out on this process, and because it's different than what their mentors in their life have done. And that coupled with a 10-year contract would help, if you follow my thought.
Yes, I do. Okay, Liz.
Jim,
Are we about out of time?
I hate to say it, but we are, and I would love to keep this conversation going. And if you did want to connect with any of the farmers that have been on this panel, I'm not sure if you all want to maybe put your email addresses in, or we could send some follow-up information if you did need to connect with anyone that's been on the panel today. But just really quickly before we head out, I do just want to thank all of you. I would spotlight myself, but it's not letting me. So I'm just going to be a dark box talking to you. But I appreciate all of you for joining us for the panel today, and for all of your time preparing and joining pre-panel meetings, for sharing your expertise and your experience. And Jim, thank you for coming back out into the world with us and joining the panel. Again, just want to thank Becky for making that happen too. But yes, if you would like a chance to win an Alliance t-shirt and a gift card, make sure to fill out the evaluation that's in the chat box. And tomorrow is a pretty packed lineup too for the summit. We have some great speakers to just continue this week with us. So just putting in a little plug to join us for that for the rest of the week. And Frank, Lee, Joe, Jim, thank you again so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it, and can't wait to stay in touch.
Well, good. And Liz, I want to thank the participants. I've been watching the number, and a lot of folks have been with us for the entire time, obviously, because the number didn't change very much until just the last minute or so. So people are wrapping it up, know that we are too. But thanks to the participants, this is how we make progress, is we check into these kinds of things, and we listen, we learn. I hope there's been a little bit today that someone can take away from this and ask more questions, because at least my goal was to stimulate some additional questions that need to be asked. So thank you.
Thank you. Happy Tuesday. We'll see you all later.